Hello, everyone, and welcome back to day 4 of Coalesce and our next session, where Matthew Haas is going to be walking us through how startups can operationalize their data. This is a very important question that I think anyone that has worked in data at a startup has asked, which is, okay, doing great data is great, but I also need to do things with it. And so I'm so excited and really grateful to have Matthew here, who's going to walk us through how startups can actually make use of their data. And as always, I'm sure you all know the drill by now. Please keep any comments, questions, mostly memes in the Slack channel. Matthew will be by after the talk to follow up. And thank you so much for coming out, and to Matthew for presenting.
Thanks. All right, startups' journey to implement operational BI. Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me out. I'm going to be talking a lot about not just operationalizing the BI, but operational, like your finance, your operations data, all the data that doesn't always get a lot of love at the DBT world, because it's not the software, it's not the product, it's just kind of the business data, the stuff that makes the wheel turn. But before I get into the fun, I wanted to look at who's here. So I just reloaded all the data from the survey we took, and just thought it'd be kind of fun to pull this in. One of my motivations for doing it like this is I looked at a bunch of different data to try to figure out what are people struggling with, what are the audience like, and all of the data was behind these paywalls, these surveys, and I was like, why? We've got all these people here, let's just ask them, and then afterwards I'll just open up the data. If anyone else wants to know how other people are thinking, you're more than welcome to poke through the data. But looks like a majority of the audience is here. If you are remote, hello, and it looks like I have some data quality issues, so good start for a talk. How large is your company? Looks like my kind of sweet spot is definitely kind of that under 500. Once you get bigger than 500, the systems, the solutions, everything starts to just grow, and the teams get a lot bigger. But who really needs the help? The smaller companies, the startups that just don't have the resources to put a lot of people. All of the data engineers, they end up going to focus on the product because you got to sell something. But you still need to have support on the business side. And so the 1 to 50, the under 500, those are the people that I really try to help with this, like that startup feel. What are we using? It's not nearly enough DBT on there, but a good smattering of other tools. How much did? Okay, wow, there's a lot of Oracle here. Interesting. How many people are supporting your BI? Those are good, solid teams. I'll tell you about myself. I'm a team of 1. It's just me on the business side. I get to manage our ERP NetSuite, Salesforce, our data warehouse, and then try to stand up all the BI and the DBT. And that's not uncommon in the startup space for what the support's like on the business side. And then how data-driven is your company? It's impressed to see, actually, the good growth. I think for a lot of companies in the startup space where I work, as they're trying to implement ERPs, they tend to kind of be stuck in that data-curious and data-resistant realm. And it's a lot about, I focus a lot of my attention about how do you get people out of that? And then what's your greatest challenge? This is always my favorite one, because understanding your challenges is where you're going to put your attention and your time, and company culture is a huge one. So it's useful to see all of that. So getting into the actual meat of the talk here, agenda, I'm going to chat just a bit about me, and then talk about why operational data and operational BI, why it's hard, and a little bit contrasting the operational data with the business data. The operational data and the business data with the product data, and how they're different, because there's a lot of ways that they're different, and it really changes how you have to prep, work with, validate your data because of the challenges of the different types of data. Talk a little bit about, for a startup, what a roadmap looks like, and what are the things that I try to do to make sure. One sec. There we go. one of the things that I try to do to make sure that everything goes well is I try to bring the business and the accounting and the service and operations all along for the ride. And then finally, chat a little bit about a project that I'm trying to work on, the idea of an open source NetSuite data model. All right, so I could talk about the ERPs I've rolled out and the Salesforce instances I've stood up, but I want to spend some time more talking about like what I value, because I think that speaks more than the things I've done. So documentation for me has, first of all, I hate documentation. Nobody likes to document, but I found that documentation is what, it keeps the tech debt down. It allows you to understand 6 months, a year, 2 years from now what's happening. And the documentation I do is very different than if you're documenting a product. When you're documenting a product, you make your README file that it encapsulates this project, and you understand, and you comment your code. When I document, I'm documenting not just the code. My code's usually small. I'm documenting who asked for it, why did they ask for it, how long is this here for, when can I obsolete this piece of information, what's triggering this, and how does it interact with the rest of the organization. It's a very more integrated and holistic than just what does this thing do. Definitions are hugely important to me, and it's usually where I start a lot of my conversations. One of my favorite examples is I had a CFO come to me and say, hey, I need a list of all of our customers. Go pull me a BI, pull it by quarter, all the new customers we added. So I turned around fast. Next day, I'm like, here's your dashboard. And he looks at it and he goes, well, those aren't our customers. There's banks, there's finance. That's not our customer. I go, well, it was what was in the customer field. And he goes, no, I want to know like who we're selling to, not who's paying the bill. So, okay, I go to our Salesforce. I pull our customer out of our Salesforce. And I go, next day, here it is. Here's our customers. And he goes, no, that's who we're shipping to. Those are distributors. I want to know who our customers are. And I'm like, where are we capturing that? We weren't capturing our customers. We were capturing our distributors. We were capturing our financing companies. But at no point did we actually capture who the company thought the customers were. And so getting a good handle on what definitions mean across the org that's like the first thing I do now is I ask, like, what do you mean by this thing? And then the last one is leveraging training. I am a big tent type of person. I bring in as many people as I can in the org. When I started getting into this side of the fence, I was actually, my photo there, a scientist, a chemist by training. And when I kind of jumped the fence onto this wide world of data and started working with the software team, there wasn't a nice, easy, gentle on-ramp. I would ask questions like, okay, how do I add to the repo? And they go, you commit it. Just go commit your changes. And I go, oh, okay, what does that mean? How do I do it? How do I store my credentials? All of like the simple things, and at some point, I think early on, I was just plain text storing my credentials into my data warehouse. All the things you shouldn't do because I didn't have that good training support throughout the organization. And so as much as I can, I'll hold weekly lunch and learns, I'll hold seminars, anything you can do, because people at your company, they want to learn, they want to be involved, they just need that help. All right, so I mentioned a little bit that operational data is different than your standard product data. What exactly does that mean? If I was to kind of break it down between business data and product data, let's kind of take some examples. So what are the source data? I'm thinking ERPs, your NetSuite, your Salesforce, your Oracles, your HubSpots, all of that transactional business information that's feeding in. Contrasting with your product data, where it's these custom data sources you've built out that they're tracking their customer metrics, your IoT data, all of the things that all of these presentations have talked about for the last week are that product data side. And they really are quite different. At a volume standpoint, the operational data is much smaller, much smaller. And that poses challenges, as we'll talk about throughout the rest of this. I'm usually thinking in the order of 1,000 to 100,000 transactions. And of course, as you get larger companies, you're always going to have more transactions, but it's going to be a factor of 10, a factor of 100,000 less than you do on the product side. I've never had someone ask me to set up a Kafka stream for my NetSuite data. So it's just a little different. Data integrity, though, is very critical. And to contrast what that looks like, if I was to say, some sensor data we've got on one of our machines, and say we lost 1% of our packets in transit, and we're just missing 1% of the data, most people would say like, well, that's pretty good. You got 99% of the data. Great, we can do a lot with that information. If I was to tell you we were missing 1% of our sales orders, like, that would cause some pretty serious problems on our balance sheets. So every single transaction matters on the business side, and you can't have loss of transaction. You have to do a lot more data validation to make sure that that's the case. And the last thing is just on the structure. The business data, it feels very structured. The schemas don't change. We'll get into an example here, but it feels very rigid and confined. And the product data, you've got your structured data, your unstructured, you've got your data lakes, your lake houses, you've got a little bit of everything. And it just doesn't, there's just a lot more complexity you have to work with on the product side that you don't have to as much on the business. So here's an example I just pulled up for some product data. And if you were to read through this product data, some of the things you might notice would be if you read the time of the phase of the moon, I think we've got some sunrise and some temperatures, and you'd say, oh, this is probably from Weather Company. And you'd be right, because this is their data model for the Weather Company. But if I pulled this one up on the business side, you'd say, well, it's a charge, and I've got an amount, and I've got some billing information and some shipping information. I've got a currency. Okay. Anyone want to take a guess what company this is for? Or even what software product this is? Because it could be anyone. It could be any company. It could be it could be a Netsuite or Oracle. It could be anything, because this is just basic foundational business data. And the more I started getting to this, the more I realized that we're all very similar, and we all transact very similarly. But for whatever reason, even though we're doing a lot of the same stuff, trying to stand it up, it feels hard, and it feels not easy. And so when companies launch ERPs and they try to start going down this data journey, there's a lot of promises that are made. Things like that we're going to allow us to forecast our costs in our departments, that we're going to track these year-over-year costs. And I would challenge people out here, right? We all doing a lot of stuff in the cloud. What was your cloud spend last month? And what was your cloud spend for your department? And knowing that information, the thing about accounting, it's a zero-sum game. If you're spending money on the cloud in one spot, it means you're not spending money on something else to help launch that and move that product forward. And that data gets buried, it gets lost, and it's hard to get out of the systems. When I think about optimizing inventory, make sure if you're an inventory company, not having out-of-stock inventory. How can you enable your operations, your supply team, to make sure that those things can happen? On the revenue side, how can you take that revenue data? Now, I think by and large, as I've talked to people around here, that people find ways to pull that information out because revenue is so critical, but you might not be getting all of the revenue information. So you might know what you've sold, but you might not know how many payments you've collected and what your outstanding AR balance is for your customer, because those things matter a lot for your accounting team and for your ability for your company to function. So a lot of companies, when they start down this BI journey, there's a lot of promises that are made, that we're going to use big data, that we're going to do predictive analytics, we're going to forecast, we're going to optimize, we're going to do all of these things, and then we get stuck. We want to know not just what happened, but why did it happen, how will it happen, and then how can we make it happen? How can we leverage all of this data to really push our business forward? But we get stuck building data models about what was done, about how many sales orders we made, about how many open purchase orders we have, or just what our current budget and spend is. And we just spend years, usually for a startup, a couple of years, just trying to get sense of what this world looks like and rebuilding the same thing over and over. When you talk to business leaders, they talk about that data, it's complicated, and there's a lot of it, but it's elusive, it's useful, but it's complex. This idea that it feels hard. And when you talk to them, they say, why? Why did the implementation of your BI not go well? They say that it took too long, that we lacked the skills in-house, that the technology was too complicated. They feel like it's not working and it's not easy, but no one really can put a thumb to it. And I'm going to say it's because we're stuck trying to build the same wheel over and over. So I want to get a little bit into these are the things that techniques I've come to that have helped me build and accelerate the data model and the kind of bringing that operational BI out to the forefront. I mentioned business definitions, having a medallion model, a structure that everyone at the company can understand. Is really helpful as you bring people in, and then just staying out of the box. And it's such a different term than this group is used to, because we're a bunch of software developers and coders and engineers, and to say don't build custom is very kind of against what we usually believe. And so it's where does that happen, and how do you keep your transactional systems easy to upgrade while allowing you the spot to do that? So definitions. These are a couple of the three big ones I always like to hit. Who do you buy from? Who do you sell to? And what do you sell? When you start thinking about bringing in more that operations, that finance side into this conversation, getting alignment with your product team on, are we going to call it an item? Or do we call it, are they SKUs? Are they parts? Like, what is it that we're selling? Who are you selling to? We mentioned this one, right? Is it customers and end customers? Is it a tenant organization? Being able to have an understanding of what these terms are is critical to getting good company-wide acceptance and growth of your dashboards. And it's one of the things that usually doesn't come up until there's a problem, and I would say do it first. Deal with these definitions before the problems, not when they arise. The medallion architecture, I learned that term this week. I've just been calling it gold, silver, and bronze, but I think this is phenomenally helpful for me as I bring people in that aren't used to developing in any sense, giving them a structure to work in and telling them a playground where they can play. Last week I worked with 4 engineering process engineers, and none of them done Git commits before. And so I kind of stepped them through that process, but telling them it's okay. I'm going to review your code. I'm going to make sure that I don't commit this change, or you commit the change, but I'm not going to merge this branch until we've made sure it's not going to break anything. Giving them that place to work and the spot to work in. So I don't have them touch the raw data, that comes in, but they can play with the staging data, and they get a sandbox in the staging database. And I actually separate them out into physical databases, and I hide them and I permission restrict them away so that no one touches what they shouldn't be. But the rest of the company, all they ever know is my production data. They only know what actually gets committed into that final merge branch, and that's all they ever see and all they ever know. And the stuff that gets there, that should be your gold released, the stuff the whole company is going to turn to, your finance, your supply chain. The data that gets in there is what they're going to look for their source of truth going forward. And the last one is on when I say out of the box, what does it mean? This was one of those terms that you hear over and over, out of the box, stay out of the box, but no one ever tells you what out of the box means. So I spent a year and a half not adding a custom field into Salesforce because I thought a custom field wasn't out of the box, right? It's custom. But that's not really what they mean. When they say don't do an out of the box in a transactional system, what they're saying is make sure you don't add tech debt that's going to impede your ability to upgrade the system. So a couple times a year, Netsuite rolls out an upgrade, and bam, on some day of the month in the year, we suddenly are in a new system. And God willing, we had enough time to test all of our changes and customizations and scripts that we've got in there, but no matter what, we are getting upgraded to the new environment. And the more customizations and scripts I've put in that environment, the more time I have to dedicate to me and my team, mostly me, to make sure those things aren't going to break, and to make sure that you're still going to be able to put in a purchase order, and make sure that the automations are going to keep working the way you expect them to. So when we say out of the box, standard fields are great. Automation workflows, go for it. Custom fields, yes, but know that that's going to break as we try to build data models and work on things as a group and use out-of-the-box dashboards, that it's going to affect those. So just understanding when it's okay to use custom fields and to use them sparingly when possible. Common pitfalls. This one happens a lot at a startup because they just need to hire people. And so they thinking about all the promises that have been made around BI, they go, I need a scientist. And if you bring a scientist in a company, when you don't have any data in a data warehouse, it's really hard to be a scientist. And so then they might hire an engineer. But it's really hard to do good data engineering when you have problems with the source data. One of the data pipes I had to clean up was the data engineer was told that they needed to take their data source, and they needed to figure out what type of customer was it. Was it an airport? Was it an education? Was it was it a grocery store? What was it? And so they did what any good engineer would do. They figured out a way. They looked in the description and they parsed out the description. If it said airport, it's an airport. Great. If it says grocery store, it's a grocery store. Well, we have a new one. We have an airport. It looks like an airport, but it's actually a school. Well, shit, okay, that's okay. We can do this. We can fix it. And so they made an exception. And after about a year of exceptions, this file, I kid you not, was like 500 lines of code for all the different exceptions for all the different customers to make sure they were all categories right. And had they started with an analyst, they would have gone to the system and said, no, we're going to put a new field, we're going to make it required, and we're going to make sure everyone categorizes the customer correctly. And so I would say that you should start with the analyst, get your structure, and then build from there. The other one I hear a lot is machine learning. One of my favorite when I bring people in and interview questions is, great, you want to do machine learning? How much data does machine learning take? And they'll tell me, oh, it takes 100 gigs, 200 gigs of data. I go, cool, we're not doing that on our sales orders, right? We've got not near enough volume on the transactional stuff to do data engineering and machine learning. And so it's really focusing on, a lot of times just putting a hold on all of that, on the machine learning side, until you're a spot at a company when you can do it, or focusing on the data that you can do data engineering or machine learning on that you can then pull in to help your sales team. And then the last one here is don't work in a silo. People want to help, and the more people silo in companies, the more difficult it makes to have those definitions merged, to have those projects merged, to make that progress you made in one spot translate over to another spot. So as much as you can, pulling those cross-functional groups together. All right, so the last thing I want to talk here is about a project I've been working on for last couple months, and it unfortunately is not where I would love it to be a Git repo that I could say, hey everyone, come check it out. But it's a work in progress, so I'm going to focus a little more about the vision, where I want to take this, and then invite everyone here to come along for the journey if you're interested. So let's start with the premise. We've kind of talked a lot about this operational data, the business data. A lot of companies are handling transactions, procure to pay, order to cash in the same way. Procure to pay, you put a requisition in. You purchase a PO, the PO gets received, you invoice it, and then there's a payment that's made. On the quote to cash side, there's an opportunity into a quote, into a sales order, into order fulfillment, to an invoice, to a payment. It's so ubiquitous. This is just a very common interview question where they just say, what is the process? And the candidate's expected just to know it because this is how businesses largely run. And there are lots of exceptions and changes. What if you process credit cards? But the processes are very standardized across. And because of that, the data model is very similar across all these different organizations. But for some reason, we keep making the same data models. We keep making the same BI reports. If I were, I'm working on an OTIF dashboard. Great. I bet other people in this audience also need an OTIF dashboard. OTIF, on time in full. Did your shipping department, were they able to fulfill the orders when they said they were going to fulfill them? Useful dashboard. But why is it that everyone's got to do the same thing on their own? And so I propose Joffle Shop 2.0. I haven't run the name by DBT. I hope it's okay. We're going to have to talk some more. But the idea here, I pulled the definition because I was like, well, what is it? Trying to figure out and define a project scope is very important. So I pulled the actual definition right off of the Joffle Shop. A self-contained playground DBT project, useful for testing out scripts and communicating some of the core DBT concepts for business. 2.0 shouldn't be just about the software side of it. It should be about the business side and about how do we bring in the analysts to help with the data modeling, and how do we bring in the dashboard reporting? How do we make all of this work and not just for the development? I say just. I love Joffle Shop. I've learned all of my DBT through Joffle Shop, but I want my supply chain in there. I want my analyst that's working on revenue recognition in there, because I think this is the foundation that the business should grow on. I'll put really quick, I mentioned the Netsuite as a data model. This is kind of a high level, and this is just on procure to pay. So one piece of it, the Netsuite data model is a very Snowflake data model. There's a lot of tables joining tables in their data model, it's very important for a transactional system to get that structure, and they've laid it out well. But trying to model it's a chore. So zooming in a little bit, we take employees and entities and the next transaction, the last transaction, the status codes, and the vendor IDs, and we bring that all together and join that on our transaction table. And NetSuite loves to just throw all the transactions in one big table. But you need to then split it out, because no one goes to someone in sales and says, hey, show me all your transactions. They say, show me your sales orders. Show me your purchase orders. They want to know by these standard business definitions, so then I split that out to be able to say, here's your sales order table, here's your item fulfillments table. But that's not all, because that's just at the header level. That's just a transaction document. It doesn't help just to know it's sales order number 100. You want to know what were all the parts on the sales order. What were all those SKUs? And those are all in a different table, the sales order lines, that you have to join back from the lines table back to the header documents. And so at the end of the day, you end up getting just a mess. It's a lot of models. They're very structured. They're organized. It's all well documented, but it's a lot of work to build this up. And when I mentioned at the beginning that it takes 2+ years for startups to get out of that historical pathway and get into some of this forecasting and predictive, it's because of this. They're trying to figure out what this means while they're trying to run their business. It's that you're trying to build the airplane while you're taking off. And the more we can do to help startups and to help businesses, I think the more they're going to come to the community and the more they're going to contribute. So just a last slide here on my vision. What does this Jostle Shop 2.0 look like when it's all built out? I want these pre-built NetSuite models. I want to validate on the data ingestion as well as the transformations. You've got to build trust for this data because it's so critical on the business side, and having that validation built into the Jostle Shop 2.0, I think will really help accelerate companies towards that trust with the data modeling. I want to add predefined metrics and the semantic layer and unit tests and data governance, all of the bells and whistles, the cool stuff that you don't get until you're a much more established company. I want to try to empower startups to get to those things earlier and sooner, because I think there's just so much wealth that we can do with this data if we empower people and give them that easy on-ramp and bring everyone in for the journey. So closing, operational BI shouldn't be hard, and let's work together to try to make it easier. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Matthew for awesome talk about how to empower everyone with operational BI. Really appreciate folks coming out tonight. There's a couple more talks left, so hope everyone enjoys the final few sessions. Don't miss the closing remarks at 5:30 and then the closing party at Mardi Gras World tonight. Thanks everyone, and remember, any further questions, post them in Slack, and Matthew will be there chatting with you.